Good morning. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski with Children Come First. We are here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., WAAT 750 a.m. on your radio dial. And we talk about issues regarding children, education, preventative health, family living. This morning we have on our program Olivia Loria. Olivia is out in Pine, Colorado. Olivia is the Western Supervisor for the Clonlora School, and we'll be talking a little bit about the Clonlora School. She is also an advisory board member and past president of the National Coalition of Alternative Community Schools, a member of the Exemplary School Recognition Panel for the United States Department of Education, and has been a teacher in public schools in the state of Colorado. Good morning. Good morning, Olivia.
Good morning, Daria.
Olivia, we're going to talk about a lot of different issues today, but first I'd like you to let me know what is... Now, I forgot to mention Pinewood School. You're the administrator of Pinewood School in Pine, Colorado. Is that correct?
Well, I was the founder and director of Pinewood, which in 1996 we merged with Clonlora School of Ann Arbor, Michigan. So it was the first ever alternative school merger.
Tell us a little bit about the Clonlora School, Pinewood School, and how could you merge with a school in Colorado and Michigan?
How could we merge?
Yeah, how do you do that? I mean, what kind of a school is it that allows you to be able to do that?
Well, at the time that we merged Pinewood with Clonlora, Pinewood was a private school for homeschoolers. So we wrote curriculum and helped people to educate their children at home, and they were enrolled in a private school. Clonlora School is a campus school and has a large home-based program. So it was a very, very worthwhile kind of endeavor to merge the two schools. Clonlora School is much larger than Pinewood was.
All right, now tell us a little bit about those schools, the Pinewood and the Clonlora School. What is the philosophical premise? When did they start?
Both are alternative schools. Clonlora was started in 1967 by Pat Montgomery. Pinewood was started in 1981 by me. And the reason that I started Pinewood was because I had a 5-year-old daughter who was ready to go to school. And I was the local kindergarten teacher at the public school in the area at the time, and I looked around and thought, this really isn't the type of education I want for my daughter. So I called Pat Montgomery from Clonlora. I had previously taught at the Clonlora campus school, and asked Pat, how do you start a school? And so she sent me information, and I started Pinewood. We started with 5 children and multi-aged.
Now, do you cater to both children on campus and homeschooling children as well?
In Clonlora, I work with the home-based population.
Okay. So you have, what is the mix? Can you give us statistically what the mix is between the two? How many children you have?
The population of Clonlora is 9,000.
9,000 students at Clonlora?
9,000 students worldwide.
Whoa. And the Pinewood School?
At the time that we closed, we had about 300 students.
Okay. So now you didn't close, you merged.
Right.
Correct? Okay. I just wanted to make sure of that. Let's take a look at education in general and learning from your perspective and the perspective of the things you have experienced. What is the biggest fallacy of common educational practices in the United States today? What do you consider?
I consider the biggest fallacy to put all the same age children in one classroom. It supposedly helps the education, but it really does hinder. This is the only place in our lives where we are just with people of our same age. It's not natural. In life we do interact with other people of all ages. So going to a classroom where they are all the same age doesn't make that much sense. I've experienced, as a kindergarten teacher, putting all 5-year-olds together brings out the worst of being 5. Whereas if you put 5, 6, and 7-year-olds together, it seems to bring out the best of those ages. And and helps people to learn how to cooperate with people of different ages.
What was the justification to have same-age children in the classroom? How far back does that go? When did we start that practice? I remember the one-room schoolhouses weren't that way.
Right. I think it's when the school districts became bigger and the schools became bigger that we started dividing people into the same-aged classrooms. I think the idea is that it would be easier to teach children who are all the same age. But back in that kindergarten class that I taught, they were all 5-year-olds, but the levels of ability ranged from a young boy who didn't even know his colors and didn't recognize his name in print to 2 young boys who read at a 5th grade level. So that's a wide spectrum of abilities. And then there was everything in between. So it really didn't help to have people all the same level, all the same age, because they weren't the same level cognitively.
So what you're saying, I mean, changing the mindset of the people who are listening today to having different age children in the classroom, how would you talk to teachers? Let's start with teachers. How would you talk to teachers about multi-age grouping?
I would say that there's a big benefit of putting children all together, and I would use a lot of examples from my experience. For instance, in Pinewood, we had 4 to 12-year-olds all together in the same school. It was literally a one-room schoolhouse. And it was interesting because one year we decided to study Colorado history. And we all began studying it. Of course, there were different levels of understanding of the Colorado history. We decided to study Mesa Verde, and part of it was to take a field trip down to Mesa Verde. And we loaded families into cars and caravan down there, spent the weekend down there, learned a lot of things about Mesa Verde, and came back to our school, where we decided we wanted to go to the Colorado History Museum and take their class on Mesa Verde. Well, when I called to make the reservation and told them that we had 4 to 12-year-olds, they had no idea what to do with us. And they said, how are we going to be able to teach a class for 4 to 12-year-olds? What are we going to do with the 4-year-old? And I said, don't worry about our 4-year-old. She will be fine. Just do your regular Mesa Verde class, and we'll handle the rest. So we went there, and it was our first time at that museum for a class, and we had the class, and the teacher, opened the class to discussion, and our 4-year-old taught the teacher of the class something new and different about Mesa Verde that she had learned while we were there. After that, the History Museum welcomed us with open arms and never worried again about our mix of students. So I think part of it is the experience base, that if we have stories, if we have facts from our own experience to talk to teachers about the different ages, that they would eventually come to the realization that this is a good thing.
Now, I was thinking as a teacher, most teachers are ingrained in movement by age and grade and core curriculum and studying subject matter. What would you say to teachers who are listening out there who need to understand how they can get across subject matter when they've got 4 to 12-year-olds in the same classroom? How do they do that?
Well, one of the other fallacies that I think happens in most schools is that we look for a median level of teaching. We teach to the middle, or we teach
that doesn't
lowest
exist.
Denominator.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that we always need to do is teach to the highest denominator. Because if you teach to the highest, then the younger ones or the slower ones rise to the occasion and get as much out of that as possible as they're able to get out of it. If you teach the lowest denominator, nobody wins.
Well, in actuality, that is a principle in physics. Whatever you put your attention on will become reality. In other words, in a scientific experiment, we have discovered the equation that when a scientist determines what he figures the outcome will be, that is the outcome he will get. And so what you are saying is basically a law of physics. If we teach to the highest, then we will get more of the same. In fact, in traditional schools today, in public schools and in private schools, we teach to the lowest. We're looking at the handicap legislation, which looks at our students who are below. Schools get funded a tremendous amount of money for identifying handicapped children, whether it's emotional, physical, mental, intellectual handicaps, and so we label those children. So what you're saying is that we create more handicapped children just by identifying them and lowering our standards.
Exactly. That law of physics applies. There should be a law of education that we teach to the highest, not to the lowest. When I taught young children, I didn't lower my vocabulary. I used a regular adult-type vocabulary with them. They learned the vocabulary and used it themselves.
I was thinking in terms of, we spent at Earth Heart Foundation here, we've spent a great deal of time looking at the textbooks from the 1800s, the McGuffey Reader and Math Book and Spelling Book, to glean where we have come from, because our intelligence level has seemed to drop. And we discovered what Ted Sizer found out in the coalition, or at Brown University, with regard to our focused attention. The McGuffey Reader and Math Book, we equate a first grade reader in the 1800s to a fifth grade reader of today, which tells us that our standards have lowered because exactly what you are saying, we do not teach to the highest anymore.
No.
Do you use textbooks in your classes?
Very minimally. With the homeschoolers, we encourage them to use whatever works for them. So some of them do use textbooks. The Clonlora philosophy is one that does not use textbooks. And there are some types of books, like social studies and science, that I haven't seen a textbook K through 8 that would be worth using.
Well, how do students learn if they don't use a textbook?
They learn from other books and materials that are out there, and from experiencing things.
Now, I need to know for myself as well as for our listeners, how do you possibly determine your students' level of moving from grade to grade, because that's what we have to do in order to be able to give them a diploma? How do you determine their knowledge level if you're not using textbooks? I'm sure that's a question on everybody's mind who's listening.
We don't have grades in Clonlora. The only reason that we use grades would be to determine a level of a curriculum to send, but we do not really have kindergarten, first grade, second grade. In the campus school, the students mix. They have a high school level, they have an elementary level, but they don't use grades as such. You allow the children to proceed at their own rate, at their own speed, and at some point you realize they're ready for the next level and move them on.
You talked about a curriculum. What kind of curriculum do you have?
Very eclectic, and this is for the homeschoolers. Many of them want a guide of what they would do. And our curriculum, even though it may say fourth grade, is not just fourth grade, because we know that not all fourth graders learn at the same rate. So we will have items on there that would be lower than fourth grade. We would have items on there that would be higher than fourth grade. We also look at the different learning styles, and we recognize that different students learn in different ways. So we might have some things on there that are more based more for the audio learner, or for the visual learner, or the visual spatial learner. We have incorporated a lot of different things so that families can pick and choose whatever it is that works for their child.
So the curriculum then is not, children move at their own rate, at their own speed. They're not tested at the end of the year, the beginning of the year, to find out what level they're at or what grade they're at. So it gives them the opportunity. And is that at the main campus as well? Is that how it functions as well?
That's true, yes. At the main campus, they proceed at their own rate, and they tend to use very few textbooks.
Now, I know that this is Dr. Daria Brzezinski with Children Come First. We're here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m. on WAAT 750 a.m. On your radio dial, we talk about children family living in all aspects, education, all aspects of the child's life. And today we're talking to Olivia Loria. She's out in Colorado. She's the Western Superintendent for the Clonlora School in Michigan. And we are talking about all areas. You are with the National Coalition of Alternative Schools, and you were at Columbine several miles away during the shootings in April of this year. What do you consider to be the, if you have any, lessons with regards to, I mean, you were in the area. What's important? What do we need to learn from that?
Well, you know, it was very ironic that I was hosting that conference here in Evergreen, Colorado, which is less than an hour away from Columbine, at the same time that those shootings occurred. It certainly made the people at the conference have a lot of empathy for the Columbine community, and we certainly sent our thoughts and our love down to them as we continued with our conference. But the ironic part is that we had booked Yehuda Fine to speak at our conference about combating violence in our schools and our society, and about rescuing the children months before any of this unfolded. So Yehuda was there at the conference talking about combating violence just after this major violence had occurred school about 40 minutes away. Joseph Chilton Pierce was also there talking about how our upbringing could encourage violence in our children. So we had everything that we were doing at the conference was very pertinent. As far as one lesson, I'm not sure there's one lesson. We certainly need to look at what we're doing in education. We certainly need to look at how our society raises our children. And I think that's what both Yehuda and Joseph Chilton Pierce were talking about. And one of the things that Yehuda talked about that makes a lot of sense is that there needs to be a personal connection with an adult for each of our young people. And if you have large schools like Columbine, oftentimes these young people don't have a personal connection with an adult. They're anonymous, and they go through the system without being recognized as individuals. And they need that. And that's, I think, if anything, that would be the lesson.
So what you're saying then is that now Columbine has 2,000 students, and I personally have done several surveys of the shootings since 1997. What I discovered is every single one of those shootings occurred in a very, very large school, and large meaning 800 or more students. So what you're saying, or what I hear you saying, is that the size of the school, not just class size, are important? And how are they important?
Well, the class sizes are important. Our national coalition schools tend to be smaller. They tend to have the environment where each student can be recognized for who he or she is as a person. The large schools don't provide that. There are too many people crammed into a building, and often a student can go through without being recognized as an individual. And that's a very important piece in the growing up process.
Well, you've made two very controversial comments here, multi-age grouping as well as small class size, and I think it's really important to the culture of the school. However, how can we change the attitudes and beliefs of the general public with regard to that? I mean, we've been doing this for 100 years now. How can we possibly change the attitudes of superintendents and school boards to those two things in particular?
Well, certainly the shootings have brought to light the idea of smaller schools, smaller classroom sizes. I think that the education system in general is looking at that and needs to look at that further and needs to start implementing it. And the other piece is you can have a large school but set it up in such a way that there is the opportunity for the personal connection. So they don't have to disband the whole big buildings right away, but they need to look at how to be able to connect with each of those students in the school.
Well, that's virtually impossible when you're talking about 2,000 students. I mean, any teacher, one teacher, especially in a high school, can have 200, 300, 400 students a week.
Well, we have a school out here that is a coalition member, the Jefferson County Open School. It's a public alternative school. It has 800 students in it, so it's not the 2,000.
I didn't know it had 800 students.
Pardon me?
I didn't know it had 800 students. I thought there were
about
less.
800 students in it. But they've set it up in such a way that they have advising sessions where they have about 10 students and a teacher together, and they use all of their staff as advisors. The principals and advisors, the vice principals and advisors, all of those have an advising group. And within that advising group, they do make those personal connections. So it can be done. It takes a lot of work.
And that school
Our schools could do it if they tried.
That school is about 8 miles.
Motivation to do it.
That school is about 8 to 9 miles down the road from Littleton.
Exactly.
And Rick Lopez, is he the principal?
No, he's
director?
moved on. There was a new principal this year who took over after he left. Her name is Bonnie Walters. And actually,
Rick's not involved anymore?
He's at a higher level in the administration of Jefferson County.
He was the one I happened to call after the shootings to touch base with him. He was so upset I didn't know which direction he was in. But what most people don't understand is the aftermath of this and what happens to students and teachers and faculty at the point where I spoke with him. And a week later, they were still dealing with aftershocks in the school system and what to do, and the fear of children, and teachers and administrators have been up for 24 hours. I mean, they virtually did not sleep. Did you, and these are the kinds of things that we don't even understand so far away and not being close to the situation itself. Let's go a little bit about the Coalition Conference. Can you talk a little bit about who was there and what kinds of things you talk about? It's not your traditional conference in a hotel, I'm told.
No, it isn't. Usually at this conference we had rented a conference center that was up in Evergreen, Colorado. So all of the attendees stayed on campus. It was lucky for us because we had 2 feet of snow falling during the conference, and it would have been hard to get back and forth. But also, it's a community effort when we have a conference. The conference is set up for students, parents, and staff to attend. So we had about 200 people attending, and probably a good 100 of them were students. They are a vital part of the conference and of the National Coalition. We have students who serve on the board of the National Coalition. We have 9 student members and 9 adult members, and the students have an equal voice in the goings-on of the coalition. The conference this year had Yehuda Fine talking about combating violence in our society and rescuing the children, and his experiences working with homeless young people. We had Joseph Chilton Pierce talking about his newest findings on the heart-brain connection. And we had Joseph Schaefer from Canada talking about diversity and real communication. Students, parents, and staff all attended these workshops. Then we had numerous other workshops that were put on by students and by adults, both. We had one student from Dr. Pedro Obistos Campos High School do a workshop on Puerto Rican cooking. We had one student from Clonlora School in Ann Arbor, Michigan, from the campus school, do a workshop on martial arts. On and on. We had many workshops and activities going on for the conference from Wednesday through Sunday.
It sounds like a very, very different kind of conference than educators are used to, with students and parents involved with teachers and administrators. And I'm sure school board members as well. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, we didn't have any school board members there, no.
Okay. So you generally have the culture and the community of the school all participating together and interacting together and learning from each other from around the country.
Exactly.
Which is a very unique environment.
That ties the members of the coalition together is that students, parents, and staff all have a say in the educational process. So we are what some people consider democratic schools.
All right. We'll talk a little bit about the word democratic school in a little bit later. I wanted to tell our audience you are listening to WAAT 750 AM on your radio dial. We are here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 AM. If you'd like to reach us, this is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. You can reach us at 570-639-2931. That's 570-639-2931. Or email us at prokids, PROKIDS, at rlc.net. That's Red Light Communications, rlc.net. Olivia, how can people reach you? What is a phone number and an address where people can reach you?
People can reach me at 303-816-9335, and I'm at 112 Road D, as in David, Pine, Colorado, 80470.
And do you have an email address you'd like to give out to people?
I do. It's Olivia at purplemtn.com.
purplemountain.com.
It's the abbreviation for mountain.
All right, and we will be taking a break here to talk to our let our sponsors have a little bit of information. So if you'd like to find out anything about our program or our broadcast, you may call us at 570-639-2931. We are here today. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski with Children Come First. We are here with Olivia Loria, who's out in Pine, Colorado. We're talking about alternative education, not meaning necessarily at risk. And you can reach her at 303-816-9335. That's 303-816-9335. And we'll take this moment to hear from our sponsors. You are with us, WAAT 750 AM on your radio dial, and Children Come First with Dr. Daria Brzezinski, where we talk about issues relating to education, family, anything that involves children. Today we are speaking with Olivia Loria. She's out in Pine, Colorado. She's the Western Superintendent of the Clonlora School, which is in Michigan. And we have been talking about issues regarding alternative schools, not alternative meaning at-risk students, but I'd like to call them progressive schools for the sake of our conversation here, so people don't get the idea that we are talking about all the children who are at risk here. Olivia, let's talk a little bit. You alluded to these schools being democratic schools. Could you compare and contrast the public school democratic process, and by that I mean the student participation in student council meetings, etc., with real-world democratic processes that you go through in your democratic meetings?
Okay. One thing to note, though, is that public alternative schools, again, those that are not at risk, will use the democratic process, like we use the democratic process in our private alternative schools. So what we're really contrasting would be institutional schools, traditional kinds of schools, versus democratic schools.
Correct.
They can be public or private in either case. In a traditional institutional type school, the students have very little say in what they do and how they do it. People tell them, they come into a class, they're told what to do, they're told how to do it, and they follow directions. They get to be real good at following directions, but they don't know how to take charge of their own learning process. In a democratic school, Oftentimes, students have an equal say in the curriculum. They decide what they're going to learn, how they're going to learn, and how they're going to proceed. So they have a major involvement in their own educational process. One technique that is used in some of our schools is called the walkabout program. And it's for high school students, it's almost a mini thesis type program where the student picks what he or she wants to do, has a committee who helps and advises, and does a project and then evaluates what has been learned from that project, which is much different than being told you must write a research project or research paper on one of these 10 topics and this is the procedure that you do. So a young person going through this democratic education often has much more motivation, much more self-initiative, is able to take on something, plan it out, and see it to the finish without having to be told, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3.
Now, you said that these students, what caught my interest is these students have more motivation and self-initiative, which is one of the critical things that businesses are complaining about with students graduating from traditional high schools today. So you're suggesting that by allowing students to take charge of their education, they in fact develop motivation and self-initiative by the very fact that they are interested in what they are doing. Is that correct?
Exactly.
The walkabout, that is a term used in Australia with the concept of someone going out to walk out in the part of the Australia that is not uninhabited. Do students walk about?
The program was developed by Dr. Maurice Gibbons from Canada. It is based, indeed, on the Australian walkabout, where the young people in the Aborigine societies grow up in the society, learning the skills they need to do, then to prove that they are adults and ready to be adults in the Aborigine society, they do a walkabout. If they return to their people, then they are welcomed as adult members of that society. The program that Dr. Gibbons developed also has our students here doing walkabouts in areas that are pertinent to our society. And the idea is once they complete all of the passages, that they would be welcomed as adult members of our society.
Is there a book on this? Does Dr. Gibbons write a book on this?
Yes, he has. I don't recall the name exactly.
All right, so it's Dr. I don't know his full name, Dr. Gibbons in terms of...
Maurice Gibbons.
His first name, I'm sorry?
Maurice.
Okay. Dr. Maurice Gibbons, and he walkabout. All right. Thinking back in the democratic process that you were talking about, it seems to me also that if children are taking charge of their life, they become active members and participants in the educational process rather than passive, which is what we have in a traditional school setting. Does this develop critical thinking?
Oh, definitely. It was interesting. At one of the schools that I taught in, we had a morning meeting, and it was a class of 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. And we always had a time to share, to talk about new things, whatever was pertinent for that day at the morning meeting. Well, one time I had been talking about nanotechnology the evening before, so I shared it with my 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, and I told them a little bit about it. But these young people at 5, 6, and 7 sat for 2 hours discussing nanotechnology and what if this and what if that and how about this. And they were able to, I mean, you wouldn't think 5, 6, and 7-year-olds could sit for 2 hours, but they did. They were so interested in the topic and what it had to offer them in the future. And then when we broke up from the meeting, every student went on to do their individual learning for the day. Many of them took those concepts that we had discussed in the meeting and proceeded to play with them during their time of study and developed them even further. And a lot of it was critical thinking of, well, what are the implications from this type of work?
So from the process of spoon-feeding our children is basically what traditional education is, a set curriculum, a set textbook, a set guide, etc. We are not allowing the critical thinking process to take place just by our very infrastructure, is what you're saying.
Exactly. We're not allowing them to do things they're capable of at much younger ages.
Now, I've observed democratic meetings in your schools. They are nothing like student council meetings in traditional schools. Can you tell us something about democratic meetings?
Well, at democratic meetings, we discuss real items.
And who participates?
To the students. Depending on the school situation, it would be everybody at the school, or it could be everybody in a particular class.
And how does that democratic process take place? I mean, the agenda is determined by who, what procedures. If you're talking about a school of 300 students, how does everybody able to take part in the democratic process?
If you were having an all-school meeting, all people in the school would have an equal vote in the meeting. The agenda is often set by students. Everyone has something to say. Any issues that are prevalent in the school community are discussed. Hiring and firing of teachers can be done in a democratic forum.
Now, do the students, are they then speak out, and do they make policies and procedures?
Yes, they do. In fact, if your students are following the democratic process, and if the school is following the democratic process, often teachers can sit back and watch the process and not have to be major components of it.
Let's talk about a little about an adjunct part of the democratic process, which is the mediation process. Are all of your students taught mediation skills?
Many of them are. At the National Coalition Conference, we have a mediation committee composed of students and adults. And if there were any disagreements or anything that needed to be taken care of, they were taken care of by the mediation committee right at the conference.
I was speaking necessarily in your schools. Do your schools teach children the kinds of lifetime skills that are required when you mediate, rather than arguing, fighting, holding grudges? Do they teach students how to work out their solutions to their problems?
A common process that would be taught in the schools would be, if you have a conflict with another student or another person of any age, you would seek out that person and try to talk through the conflict together. If that doesn't work, then you might take it to a meeting of all the, a classroom meeting, it could be an all-school meeting, could be a judicial meeting, depending on how the school is set up. And then other people would help you to solve that conflict.
It seems to me that in talking to you that the community culture itself is very, you really have a community of people, direct cause and effect. You're teaching children the kinds of skills that most traditional, well, actually right now the businesses and the legislators are talking about, even as high up as the level of the president, that we need to bring back to our schools. What kinds of things could you tell teachers and administrators and parents who are listening today to turn the traditional education system around? How do we start that in your mind?
That's a big question, Daria. How do we start? We do need to implement democratic kinds of procedures in all schools. That is helpful. We do have students who graduate from our schools who know who they are, know how they learn, and are able to take on almost any task that comes their way. We often have people who say, well, what if our students have holes in their education? Well, all students are going to have holes in their education. The important piece that our students gain from their type of education is they know how to fill those holes when they come to them. if they're in college and they realize they don't have background in something that they're taking, they know how to find out the information they need. They know how to learn. They know where to go to get that information, which is a vital piece that all of our people need.
How do your students learn how to learn? As opposed,
they learn how to learn because the main premise that we have is following the interests and needs of each student. And so if the student is involved in his or her own educational process, he or she soon learns. I learn best by being able to write it down. I learn best by seeing it. I learn best by doing it. They quickly figure that out, and then they utilize those means to learn.
So the needs, what happens is that you take from the child whatever the soul, the spirit, the internal needs of a child are, and you develop a curriculum around those needs? Is that correct?
Yes, we do. We develop a curriculum based on the needs and interests of that child.
So,
for instance, I had a student who realized that she learned best by doing. All the reading, all the listening wasn't as valuable to her as actually doing. She became interested in science. And so as a high school student, set up a number of different hands-on apprenticeship experiences for herself. That same student in college who was majoring in biology still went about finding internships and summer programs where she could be doing what it was she needed to learn. She arranged an unpaid internship for herself at Cornell University where she was working on plant genetics. When she came back to her college in the fall, she took a genetics course, and it was much better for her because she'd already been doing the practical aspects of it. And so she already knew a lot of what was covered in the course because she'd already been doing it.
You are listening to WAAT 750 AM on your radio dial. The program is Children Come First. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. We're here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., and we're speaking today with Olivia Loria from Colorado, Pine, Colorado, who is the Western Superintendent of the Clonlora School in Michigan, a school we might consider a progressive school, a democratic school, that teaches children in unique and different ways. We are talking about the democratic process here and the way children learn and the kinds of skills that people are speaking about, especially in business and the legislators today, in trying to help motivate students, develop self-initiation, critical thinking skills, taking charge of their own lives. And it seems that Clonlora School, which has been around since 1967, has found some of those keys to helping students to be able to accomplish those kinds of goals. One of the areas that you have an on-campus education program, and you also accommodate homeschooling youths. How do you accommodate homeschooling youths at Clonlora?
We have a whole home-based program that encourages people to do the same kinds of things in their home that we do at our campus school. We provide curriculum and the services of a contact teacher to help those people to educate their own children in their own homes.
Now, I would like to tell people, if you want to reach Olivia, her number is 303-816-9335. Again, that's 303-816-9335. Her email address is olivia@purple-MTN, which stands for mountain, purplemountainmtn.com. If you'd like to reach us here at Children Come First, you can do so by dialing 570-639-2931. That's 570-639-2931. Or you can email us at prokids@rlc.net. That's prokids@rlc.net. Olivia, we have a few short minutes here towards the end of the broadcast. Can you give us a summary of what you'd like people to know about regarding the progressive education, democratic principles, or here's your opportunity now to talk about these things?
I think that one of the most important pieces to take away is that in a democratic school or homeschool, parents, students, teachers all have a say in the educational process and in what is covered in those places.
Do you have any suggested readings that you might consider for our audience, or tapes or anything of that nature that might help them to understand this democratic process?
Summerhill is one that comes automatically to mind, by A.S. Neal. Chris Mercogliano just wrote a new book about the democratic process at the Albany Free School.
Learning as we go along?
Pardon me?
It's something about learning as we go along?
Exactly. Making it up
as we go along, that's it.
That might be another good one to read. Those are the two that come readily to mind.
Okay, those are two good ones. Now, you are the superintendent, Western Superintendent of Clonlora School. How would people get in touch with you? Would people call you at your number to find out about? Do you assist people in developing homeschool curriculums and possibly getting their degree through Clonlora School? Is that what your function is?
That's part of my function, yes.
What is it that you do?
I do contact teaching, where I support families in educating their own children at home. I also promote Clonlora School in the western states. So certainly they could call me on both aspects.
All right. We are talking here with Olivia Loria, and we're talking about progressive schools and progressive education. There are many, many schools in the United States, many democratic schools and progressive schools in the United States, both public and private. And perhaps you can help, you are a part of the National Coalition. For people who are listening in the state of Pennsylvania, can you tell us, Olivia, if there are any schools in the state of Pennsylvania that you would consider people coming to look at as far as members of the coalition and progressive schools?
Certainly. You have Apatinas School there, directed by Sandy Hurst in Glenmore, Pennsylvania. That's an excellent example of democratic education, has been a longtime member of the National Coalition of Alternative Community Schools.
Anyone else?
That's the one that comes readily to mind.
Are there any public schools?
Not that I know of offhand.
Are there any, now the Ted Sizer schools, are there any of the essential schools in Philadelphia, in this area?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So basically the closest one would be the Apatinas School, and that is a private school, and I would encourage I know a few in New York, and that is the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York, and the principal there is David Lehman. That is an excellent democratic public school. And another one is the alternative school in Brookline, Massachusetts, called the Wheatley School, which is a school within a school, another framework of our alternative schools. And we are looking here at both public, private, and homeschooling models. We look at many things in Children Come First. We're not supporting any one in particular because we believe that, as Olivia was saying earlier, that all children learn differently. They do not learn the same. Some children are able to learn at home and others are not. Some need this structure of a school setting to be able to learn and want to be surrounded by many children. So every model that we talk to you about, every philosophical premise that we talk to you about may strike you or may not and everybody has the right and the ability to be able to go to the kind of school that they want to. After all, this is a democratic America. But what we're trying to do here is to talk to you about the problems that we've had in our schools for at least the last quarter century, and in the last 10 years especially, with the school shootings and the kinds of problems of violence and problems that we're having in our schools, may perhaps be a reflection of many of the issues that seem to have been corrected in these alternative schools that we are talking about, especially in the National Coalition. One factor is size of school. The smaller the school, the smaller the class size, the more the ability for the student to be able to have an identity and have a communication with an adult. Secondly, the democratic principles that we were talking about earlier. When a child is able to have a say in their community culture and know that it's not just several children on a student council who are making decisions and voicing opinions, but rather a true participatory function in the school community and in the school culture, they have a very different opinion of school. Another factor is not only the democratic principles and the size of the school, but as we were talking about earlier, the movement by age and by grade and the multi-age grouping in school. Somehow or other, we looked back at the one-room schoolhouses, and they were all the same age and the same grade, and they weren't labeled ADD and LD and all those other kinds of things. And yet, in those days, we were putting out much more intelligent children, and perhaps, as Olivia stated earlier, when we have children who are multi-aged in groupings in a classroom situation, in a one-room schoolhouse situation, they learn many things far and beyond the curriculum. They learn how to get along with other people. It is a much more real-world view of schools and of schooling and the way the world really operates, where today we are putting our children in grades and segmenting them according to grades. I want to talk to you something about middle schools, because I think this is relevant here, and that is middle school time, the time when a child reaches puberty. From all the studies that we have read show that students need to have a communication with an adult. They need to be able to transition into adult life by mentoring with adults. And yet what we have done in our middle schools is that we have sectioned children off from the rest of the world, every age group, including adults, and created this peer mentality that pervades throughout adult life. In your progressive schools, how do they treat the middle school child?
They are usually part of a whole school system, K through high school. And so they are interacting with people who are younger than they are and older than they are. Unfortunately, in institutional middle schools, the curriculum is such that it's mostly review. It's seen as a catching up time to make sure that everybody has the same education background to go into high school with. And so at that point, the young person is not learning anything new, which is entirely wrong when you look at brain development, because at 11 to 14 is when a young person begins to be able to do abstract reasoning. Their brain is ready to delve into new things at a much deeper level than they have been able to do before. So if we're just doing review, we're boring those young people. And so we need to create a better curriculum at that age. We need to also make sure that they are interacting with people of all ages. Mentoring is a wonderful thing to do. Apprenticing is a wonderful thing to do at that age. Great thing.
We are talking here with Olivia Loria with Children Come First on WAAT 750 AM on your radio dial, and we have just a few minutes here. Do you have any parting words you'd like to give to our audience today? We have about 2 minutes. If you'd like to, how would you help everyone who is listening talk about what we can do next in terms of our traditional educational model?
I think we need to take a long, hard look at what we're doing educationally with our young people. I think we need to examine lots of different possibilities and offer lots of different alternatives. The charter school movement is helpful in that respect, in that we are developing different types of schools for different types of students. And I think we need to look at that long and hard. We need to evaluate what we're doing, and we need to make some drastic changes in our educational system.
Well, we appreciate your time today, all the way out from Colorado. We have been speaking with Olivia Loria, Western Superintendent of the Clonlora School. You may reach her at 303-838.
No, 816.
Oh, I've got the wrong number in front of me. 303-816-9335. Again, that's Olivia Loria at the Clonlora School. 303-816-9335, or her email address is olivia@purplemtnmountain.com. If you'd like to reach us here at Children Come First, you may do so at 570-639-2931. Again, it's 570-639-2931, or you can email us at prokids@rlc.net. That's prokids, PROKIDS, @rlc.net. Olivia, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and it's probably much earlier over there than it is here, with our few hours difference.
Thank you for having me on the program. It was very enjoyable.
And we look forward to meeting you again next week and talking with you every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m. on 750 a.m. WAAT on your radio dial, where we'll be talking about children, their families, education, and everything involved with children. So please join us again next week, and have a good day.